Sup, fellas? So, if you guys are curious about monarchism, first of all, check out the YouTube channel I have linked below, Tumblar House. I didn't know much about monarchism before that, but it's one of those things that it seems like so easy to throw out there, but it's so it's so complicated, and it's something that it's not something that can kind of be arbitrarily constructed. So I think that the time is not yet right for an American king, because any kind of king or authoritarian that we raise up is likely not going to be Catholic, is likely not going to have Catholic values, and I think it's just kind of a misunderstanding of what traditional Catholic monarchism was. We don't want to end up with some sort of authoritarian who's going to restrict Catholicism. So I think we first have to understand what monarchism is in the traditional sense before we go about giving over power to someone who might not fit the bill. So, this channel, the goal is to rebuild Christendom, and that's a long shot. It's going to be a generational thing, maybe less with the internet. I think it's possible for a mass Catholic revival to happen through the internet. But we have to kind of understand what is monarchism if we're aiming towards it. So you might not even be convinced why monarchism is a good thing in the first place. I'm going to be covering this article called "Are You a Monarchist?" by Charles Coloumbe, Tumblar House. Again, link is in the description below. But I definitely would recommend for you to watch some videos from Tumblar House, and Charles Coloumbe is the expert on monarchism, and he's written a couple books. It's kind of like what the Holy Roman Empire was composed of. It was a series of kingdoms. But again, we can't. How do we apply monarchism to America? Is kind of the topic for this video, and you can't just arbitrarily construct it. It came from a grassroots kind of situation of the Christianization of Europe, the conversion of Europe from paganism to Catholicism, and out of that laid the groundwork for all these kingdoms. The Roman Empire collapsed, and all the Goths, all the barbarian Germanic tribes came in, and they all converted. And so you have to have a Catholic populace in the first place to be able to have a traditional Catholic monarchism. So getting into the article, you should definitely read it if you get a chance. But he talks about how Aristotle and St. Thomas Aquinas, they talk about governance and how there's three good forms of governance. So there's a monarchy, an aristocracy, and a polity. And a polity is a rule by an educated landholding and military serving citizenry. And the three bad forms of governments are tyranny, oligarchy, and democracy, aka mob rule. So the best forms of governments would be kind of a mix of the three good forms of government. So having a system with a king, a nobility, and service-minded commoners would be good. And that's so crazy to think about, because if we live in the West, we think of everything in egalitarian terms, democracy, but to have a king and a nobility above you, it seems like it would just oppress us or something like that. But if the whole society is Catholic, the monarchism is actually a lot different from a centralized top-down control. So the Middle Ages kind of had this mixed form of governments with the king, the nobility, and it's kind of a blend of the three. I'd say today in America we have a mix of the three bad forms of government. Like there is some tyrannical elements, there's oligarchy and democracy. I'd say it's more oligarchy more than anything, but it's kind of hard to categorize and put America into just one of those boxes. So, and also one thing to note is it's better to have a democracy than to have a tyranny. It's better to live under like a mob rule than under a tyrannical rule, because the more that power is centralized, the worse. And on the flip side, it's better to have a monarchy, like a good holy monarchy, than a polity. So, get into monarchism, that's like step 10. We're at like step 1 or 2 right now. So this is a long game, but it's important to know this stuff. That way we know what to aim for. So another important distinction is the difference between authority versus power. So in the Catholic view of things, authority comes from God. It comes from above, which is the opposite of John Locke and the Enlightenment, where its power comes from the people. Power is just an aggregation of the masses, and it's like if 51% of people think something is moral, then so be it. It's like power comes from the top down, authority, not power. So authority is what ought to be done, and it comes from God and is mediated to the sovereign or the king through the church. So the church is above the king in terms of authority. When it comes to power is spread and diffused throughout the estates of the realm. And what I mean by that is the king has some power, the church has some power, the nobility has some power, the guilds, the towns, and even the peasantry have different powers. So power is actually decentralized in a monarchy. So a good king was like an orchestra leader directing all the different groups, while a bad one, it brought not despotism but anarchy, as contending power holders fought for more. Quoting directly from the article. So yeah, essentially, like, things are there's this principle of subsidiarity, which I'm going to get into in a little bit, where essentially you want to decentralize power as much as possible, so that the people you only want to have as much power as, like, passed higher as what can't be competently done at the current level. So, obviously, like, the state of Kentucky can't deal with a national level war with China or something like that. So that power over military would get passed up higher. I'll get more into this. Also, another distinction that he brings up in the article is that essentially there's a big change between the 17th and 19th centuries, between traditional monarchism and junior. Like, there's a new kind of faction. Basically, the royal house is split in all these European countries, and they had a series of civil wars. And the traditional monarchies is what I'm talking about. That's what our goal is. But the junior lines were more like oligarchies. And so there's all these civil wars throughout the 17th through 19th centuries, where the Jacobites supported the traditional line in the British Isles, and the Legitimists were the equivalent in France, Carlists in Spain, Miguelists in Portugal, and they all pretty much lost. So monarchism was transformed during that era, which is important to point out. And he breaks down, there's 5 points in common between all these monarchies that can be developed in the 21st century for a 21st century American monarchism. So there's the altar, which is essentially the place of the church in society, and it's going back to authority. It's the understanding that the church has the authority and gives the authority to the kings. There's the throne, which is the actual kind of institution of the throne. We don't have that here in America. There's subsidiarity, which is basically decentralizing power as much as possible. Solidarity, which is basically having economics oriented towards social good. And then there's occidentalism, which is the understanding that all the different kind of territories or countries within Christendom are all one kind of single entity. Like the notion of Christendom compared to the nation state, it's like, because we're all Catholics, we're all kind of on the same side, and therefore we'll all fight against, like, the Muslim invaders, and we all kind of have this shared kind of alliance. So it's like, what can we do practically to bring about and to build and develop these elements, the preconditions for American monarchism? So for the altar, it basically comes down to winning converts you have to win converts, and we have to re-Christianize, re-Catholicize this country. And so that is one of the things that it's easier said than done, but that's essentially what you need in order to have the altar. The church needs to have a prominent place in American society. Obviously, we're not there, but winning converts, and this is going to be a long game, but that's like the most practical thing that can be done now. The throne will come later. We can't just arbitrarily introduce a throne now. The throne would have to come at a much later stage, at which point the Catholics are much more populated throughout America. And he suggests in the article that you can basically take someone from one of the European monarchist lines and introduce them to become the king here. So I have mixed feelings on that, but I think that there definitely would be some regional kind of difficulties. Like the South would want for a Southern king, the East and the East Coast, and the West would want to have their own king from their regions. So that's kind of one that would happen later. Subsidiarity is something that we can do. And basically the principle of subsidiarity is where you're decentralizing the power. So for example, the king as ministers would deal with foreign and military affairs. Then the provinces would deal with regional issues. Things would get kind of trickled down. Then the provinces are made up of counties, so the counties would deal with county level issues. And a county is made up of towns and villages, so the towns and villages would deal with issues that they can handle. And within the towns, there's the churches, the unions, the societies, the guilds, the schools, the organizations, and they would deal with their own respective issues. And then at the very bottom is the family, which is the building block of society. So more practical stuff we can do is support state rights. So states' rights within America is a form of subsidiarity, and we need to get back and strengthen the states' rights. Building healthy communities, building healthy grassroots communities, intelligent participation in local politics, local historical societies trying to build the mythos of your local area, historical preservation, conservation, cultural activities, and stimulating local business, which is what this channel is kind of about, is building up localism. So it's basically the more you can build up the local, the better. And, things kind of from the grassroots level trickle upward. Also, he talks about how patriotism has kind of fallen here in America. Obviously some people are very pro-America, but you have to, if patriotism collapses, you have to build it from the ground up. So it's like first you have to love your town. It's like if you love your town and the people in it, then you can love your county, and then from that comes love of state, and from that love of region, and then eventually love of country. So patriotism, we have to kind of build the mythos and give people a reason to value their local places. There's a lot of kind of running away where people are just moving away from wherever, because they want to be able to buy a house. But it's like, I don't know, you can't really escape a lot of these issues, and I think that the more that we focus on localism, the better. So that's how we can build up subsidiarity. Solidarity, we have to understand Catholic social teaching. We can take care of the poor, the sick, and the elderly. And he also mentions it also means trying to reconcile the various competing economic claims according to our state in life. If we are in management, we should try to accommodate labor. If we are in the union, we ought to try to see what we can do in common with management. So it's like trying to reconcile the different economic interests, as well as trying to use our money to build up our communities rather than just like investing into 401ks. And there's a channel called New Polity, which is really good, that I'd recommend, that covers that kind of subject matter. And then Occidentalism will also come later, where this would be like if America balkanized and there's kind of like different Catholic nations or Or on a larger scale, if Canada became like Catholic also, it's this understanding that we're going to kind of help each other out, and we have this mutual respect, and we're all kind of like part of the same empire, essentially. That's what Occidentalism is, and that's like so far away. But we got to think like 7 generations ahead. So this is a long game, and I think just defining what these features are, what are the conditions we need to get to a traditional monarchy is important. So that way we can know what to aim for and what we can promote. So again, thank you. If you watched this far, thank you for 100 subs. I finally hit 100 subs. Now I'm aiming for 200 subs. And yeah, please comment down below any observations or insights. It seems like so crazy to talk about because it's like so far removed from the current reality of 2023, but we have to start somewhere. So it starts with kind of this education and having these conversations and knowing what exactly Christendom is. That way we can know how to build towards it. So I'm going to be creating more. I'm going to be doing a video also eventually on Christian nationalism. I read Andrew Torba's book, so subscribe if you want to see that in the future. And I hope you guys have a good day.